Ladies and gentlemen!
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for being here. We have an action-packed panel for you all tonight. All right, looks like up first is Mr. Andrew B. Crystal from Massey University, Auckland, with a presentation called McLuhan, Havelock, Technology and the Soul.
That's the same lady, right?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to just give me a key?
Okay, right.
Shut the right.
Firstly, I'll begin with a thank you. I think I think the Media Ecology Association is wonderful. It's a wonderful organisation, and I delight. And so, thank you. It's a joy to be here. And my second thanks in honour of my co-presenter Jerry Fialka is I'm just going to sing a song. Ah ha 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 ha. Ah ha ha ha. Arbitrary. Ha 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 ha. Okay, so that's from the chrome-plated megaphone of destiny by Frank Zappa. I just thought I'd just. The essential point here is Zappa recommended that the pre-listening experience that you need to have is to read Kafka's Penal Colony before listening to that song, and Kafka's Penal Colony is the central punchline of what we're talking about here. So herein is some recreational quibbling about the minutiae of long-dead 20th century media theorists and writers. For me, writing was something of a soothing balm and a period of respite from examining the actual present and of our post-media age. And so this is also the beginning of a work in progress as opposed to a finished package. However, I may actually tangentially touch upon that issue in terms of what a media ecology can and should be. Okay, so the crux of what we're looking at here is a comparison, an engagement with McLuhan and Havelock that was spawned my getting a hold of the papers, the correspondence between the pair. So Marshall McLuhan and Eric Havelock began corresponding in 1968 when the former was the Albert Schweitzer Professor of the Humanities and the latter the Sterling Professor of Classics. Their correspondence, initiated by Havelock following news of McLuhan's brain surgery, is punctuated by the advice they have for each other. McLuhan, for example, suggested that Havelock that he drop the academic game and go pop. Since it's not feasible to placate one's colleagues by simulating dullness and social futility, why not take the other route? If you were to present your discoveries to the unwasted or the general public, you would quickly have opportunity to lecture at sizable fees. In view of the changing state of literacy, I think your insights into the genesis of literacy are highly relevant. So, what appears to be the case is McLuhan had in mind something along the lines of making a film version of the preface to Plato. He had started correspondence to secure the rights to that. As I mentioned in Toronto, he already had a working script for the film version of the Gutenberg Galaxy. Neither of them made production. Havelock too, as we find, is also not short of counsel for McLuhan, and he basically urges him to be much less intense. Neither man, however, appears to have even considered the possibility of acting on or even following through on the other's advice. And essentially, the correspondence is a record of how they talked past each other for about a decade. This is certainly the case with respect to the question that resides at the very heart of the correspondence. Lurking at the heart of nearly a decade of an otherwise bland exchange is McLuhan's probing inquiry about the meaning of events in the 5th century BCE. BC, that way inclined. The period that McLuhan noted to Havelock would seem to have been the only time and only circumstance in which the metaphysical and the independent human being had been able to manifest himself amidst the vast amorphous resonance of tribal culture. Havelock's reply indicates that he's not completely sure what McLuhan is getting at, and subsequently he doesn't offer much in the way of a reply. If they ever did get back to each other on the matter, it was over their lunches or their meetings at conferences, because no full reply is ever documented. Here I'm taking that gap or interval as an opportunity to leap into this. And the larger context for this work is a retrospective of McLuhan's work in thinking about the relation of technology to the self and to the soul, or what McLuhan puts under the banner of the metaphysical substance of the self. He doesn't want to get bound down in terms of having hardened categories. So The rationale for undertaking this the survey, I guess, is, and which I think provides the context for McLuhan's probe of Havelock, is McLuhan puts it quite softly to Havelock in terms of the stepping up of the tribal resonance event. But if we go a little bit deeper, we can see that he's clearly motivated by his concerns about the ground or technocultural basis for individuality. Specifically, the ability of the technological ground or milieu, probably milieu is a better word to use here, to inform and sustain a belief in or experience of a private metaphysical independent substance of the self, which at various times has been called the soul. So if we accept that McLuhan's writings and actions of the period might shed light on his motive, then perhaps there's no clearer statement than that which he delivered as part of his pro-life, anti-abortion lobbying and his address at the Alliance for Life Festival in Canada's capital. I don't think I need to stress that when people become group-orientated and have lost their private identities, it is not easy to convince them about the right to individual or private life. People without identity are not easily convinced that private identity means anything. Mass, or electronic man, is not concerned about the private right to life. That indifference is new, hidden ground that we're all up against, suddenly flipping over into tribal society, which has much concern with the group and very little concern with the private individual. In the world of the data bank and social services, the individual becomes a statistic. He is part of a computerized program and his private identity is meaningless. He is a replaceable bit in a computer program. That is the world we have created. So, en route to excavating this correspondence in more detail, I look at McLuhan's early self-identification as a grammarian and how this puts him in a place where he's concerned with the soul or the soul in society and a knowledge that is related to a science of goodness. And it also implicates him in being deeply concerned with milieu. And then I go and explore the stuff that he did on the cults, because this is very interesting with regards to our understanding of spirit and spirituality and the anthropology of the human person. But I'll just skip straight to the end bit and the essential crux of what I think is potentially their disagreement. What am I doing for time?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay. So the real crux of the matter comes down to what they think is the respective meanings of those 5th century events, which is the focus of this paper, I guess. Is McLuhan presents Havelock as having the view, or having discovered, that the individual private psyche, the human self, is an artifact or development from the technology of the phonetic alphabet. McLuhan, by contrast, claimed that the soul was not an artifact or mere development, but something retrieved technologically. McLuhan is actually quite explicit about this in a letter to Lynn White. He says, the liquidating of the tribal encyclopedia of the bards, Eric Havelock's preface to Plato, was done by phonetic literacy, but there was retrieved something of great antiquity, namely pre-tribal metaphysical man. He also made a very similar claim to Joe Keogh. Havelock's preface to Plato shows that the phonetic alphabet scrapped tribal man but retrieved the primordial role of the individual in pre-tribal awareness. The difference between artifact or retrieval is fundamental. Havelock's position, be it the function of a view or a discovery or just McLuhan setting him up just to get a job done, implies that the tribal state is the original or first. More importantly, it means that the soul has the status of a mere artifact or development of technology. The soul, therefore, is something man-made and an arbitrary pattern, and certainly not an unavoidable dimension of the human condition. This, for McLuhan, is both problematic for church and for state. Christianity, McLuhan notes, definitely supports the idea of the private, independent, metaphysical substance of the self, where the technological supply, when there's no basis for it, then Christianity is in trouble. That's the medium light. We've all read this, that. Take today, he positions the same charge in relation to the state. If there is no private, independent, personal substance, such as always occupied the thoughts of sages, then all matters of authority and obedience are frivolous, all services and disservices indifferent and equal. If there is no personal identity, indefensible and intransient, then human society can only be the penal colony evoked by Franz Kafka. So in the absence of a foundation of divine source for the metaphysical and independent human being, then McLuhan saw that rights can only be arbitrary. The good can be measured quantitatively, value can come to mean convenience, and if we follow the logic of this pattern of thought to its terminus, then the individual must go. So, as McLuhan noted to one of his former students, if the self is mere artifact as opposed to an unavoidable aspect of the human condition, then it would be criminal to perpetuate him. McLuhan's position, by contrast, to the degree that he's talking about a retrieval, preserves a space for the divine source as the creator of the soul and a space for technological effects. When phonetic writing retrieves the metaphysical independent person, technologies in no way directly impact on the unavoidable dimensions of the human condition and externalities such as the soul, but they change the relationships and the spaces in between, therefore can inform and shape and constitute the milieu or the cultural basis that might predispose us to the recognition of a soul. So McLuhan's position made it possible for him to disagree with Havelock at a fundamental level, yet still use his work as a great resource. And this is perhaps why McLuhan was able to write to Pierre Trudeau that he understands how Havelock's breathless to Plato explains how the phonetic alphabet evoked a private image of the substantial individual, and that McLuhan can now explain it much better than even he can. So, just to sort of sum up in freestyle mode, I guess to the best of my knowledge, not anybody has actually looked at this subtle yet highly significant difference between these two figures. I guess the times have been upon us where we're more inclined to talk about the similarities of the pair, i.e. as members of the Toronto School. But here I've just tried to open something up and present McLuhan as actually being fundamentally and deeply different from Havelock. And that I think McLuhan, if you follow McLuhan thought through, then he gives a very profound way of interpreting like Neil Postman's definition of a media ecology. And Lance, can you remind me, what is it? This is
Study of media as environments.
No, and for the purposes of it's a survival
helping or
thing.
hindering human survival.
Bingo. No, sorry, again?
Helping or hindering, how media help or hinder human survival.
Yeah. And so, therein is the crux. Thank you.
All right, up next, thanks very much for that. Up next is Jerry Fialka, who's an artist, writer, and lecturer with Non-Finnegan's McLuhanites.
Thank you so much. Let us try. Thank you, Andrew Crystal, and thank you, Andrew McLuhan, because at a young age, he was in Marshall's arm babbling with his dad. That's what they were talking Finneganese together. So there's a typo in my title of my program today, and that was left on purpose.
Jerry.
Just like Marcia would do.
Could you move over that way? Thank you.
They're in the movies.
And mostly I want to thank Marshall McLuhan. That's the name that James Joyce put up Marshall in the book Finnegan's Way. Welcome. Let's all do the human microphone a la Occupy together. This retrieves the call and response from the slave days. If you don't study media's hidden psychic effects, you become slaves to them. So I say, you mean my whole fallacy's wrong.
You mean my whole fallacy's wrong.
Come on, we're going to tear the roof off the mother sucker. Let's try it again. Carefully make plans.
Carefully make plans.
Then do the opposite.
Then do the opposite.
What haven't you noticed lately?
What haven't you noticed lately?
Thank you so much. Everything I don't say today, I meant to say. I may contradict myself so as not to conform to my own ideas. That's Duchamp. At a party, they asked Marcel, so what do? He says, well, I'm a breather. I says, hey, we have something in common. I'm a breather too. So since this is a media yoga session, all together we're going to consciously do something we don't do. We're on automatic pilot. Together, 1, 2, 3, take a breath in. And release. Thank you so much. Media yoga session. So, raise your hand if you read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you will all do that someday. Joyce wanted you to do that. He called himself Applied Aquinas, and Marshall called himself Applied Joyce. In fact, Marshall said, quote, nobody could pretend serious interest in my work who is not completely familiar with all of James Joyce. Marshall said that it was told to him by friends who took LSD that reading the Wake out loud was similar to the psychedelic experience. More so, the Wake is not a dream about a dream, it is a dream. Though, to be counterculturally correct, you're supposed to go, well, Ulysses is the best book ever, but Finnegan's Wake, he went a little too far. So, in a way, the Wake is hell. And as Walt, this brilliant gentleman here, Andrew, told us yesterday, me and Eric, that Marshall told Walter Ong that the Wake is the Black Mass. So the guy gets to hell. The devil's at the gates of hell with a big screen TV and high-speed internet, Netflix and everything. The guy goes, wow, there's TV in hell? And the devil goes, that's all there is. So we're going to do a tetradic flip and encourage you all to start your own Marshall McLuhan Finnegan's Wake Club, reading club. We've done it for 22 years in Venice, California, and it's heavenly. Edmund Carpenter wrote that electricity made us all angels. Alan Watts loves to quote G.K. Chesterton, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. We can all do that right now. You don't have to go and read Finnegan's Wake. You're too busy deleting Facebook friends and avoiding people like me. The DNA of Finnegan's Wake is one word, laughter. So I'm going to laugh tears, excuse me. I'm going to say the word you said and we're all done. We all read Finnegan's Wake. Laugh tears.
Laugh tears.
How easy is that? And you notice that Joyce culture jammed an already existing word by adding 2 letters, A and S. So that is as, that is an adverb. And all speech is metaphoric. In fact, Joyce used the pun, this is Marshall, as the paradoxical exuberance of being through language. Check those 3 words, human microphone. Being through language.
Being through language.
That's Marshall McLuhan's mosaic writing method. He evoked psychogeography of Joyce's verbiage. Like Bucky Fuller, I seem to be a verb. Like the Hopi Indians, no nouns, all verbs. They embrace contradiction calmly. That's Louis Buñuel's screenwriter said, Louis embraced contradiction calmly. And Louis was the first choice for Annie Hall after Fellini, and then Marshall got 3rd. Lucky we got him in there. Louis Buñuel also said, thank God I'm an atheist. These guys explore the etymology of words. I'm fond of this word jujitsu. If you don't know, it came from Chinese and Japanese, and the Jew part is calmly, and the second part is art and science. So that's where the word jujitsu comes from. That's what these guys are doing. Back to embracing contradiction calmly. Gurdjieff said that laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. But it's indeed, this gentleman started with Frank Zappa, Frank Zappa nailed it. He said, nothing is what I want. And applicable to our day and time right now, he said, you gotta love the cops as they beat the shit out of you on the street. Embracing contradiction. He learned it from Lenny Bruce, who said we can call cops three things: policemen, pigs, and peace officers. Wouldn't that just solve it all? We just call them peace officers. We become what we behold. That's Blake. So I'm holding this abstract, and it is an abstract. So McLuhan Knights is what we're talking about. McLuhan Knights, that's the word night at the end, N-I-G-H-T. It seems as though there are people who are often called failed McLuhanites. So we sort of probe McLuhan days, or days, D-A-Z-E-D. So we were told, well, that's too elitist to say there's failed McLuhanites. So now we were told to call them non-Finneganese McLuhanites. So who knows? Basically, we're just here to needle the subnobulism and rescue McLuhan from McLuhanism and McLuhanites. My friends at a party recently with Richard Schickel, the great Time magazine film critic and film historian. He said, so Richard, what do you think of, this before he died, just a year ago, he says, what do you think of McLuhan? He said, fraud. And then he comes back to me and says, well, semi-fraud. Now, he didn't respond to Richard and say, well, what do you think of him as a manipulative satirist? Another friend of mine who's a successful novelist, playwright, and wrote for the New York Times, he prepared for our group by reading a little McLuhan. He says, this guy's a poet. So we know he came from the Symbolists. He came out of Edgar Allan Poe. He discovered the detective novel, reasoning backwards, effects precede causes. And of course, Mailer and Melville and everybody else was trying to make and write the great American novel. Guess what? Marshall knew you can't write the great American novel because it's the front page of the newspaper. Marshall's law is complex clairvoyance. He is Toto pulling the curtain away in The Wizard of Oz and just saying, here, you decide. In fact, it is a grand, complex clairvoyance moment, conceptual continuity, as Zappa would call it, that Joyce put Marshall's name in the wake. You know, you can go to the archive in Toronto and see Marshall's little scribble in the wake where it says Marshall McLuhan, and Marshall wrote me in the column. So, here we go. You fast thinkers. Lance, get off your cell phone and think about this for a second. James Joyce invented the net, the most powerful media on earth right now, the internet, and he disguised it as a book. No, that's wrong. I'm a failure. I'm not a miserable failure. Or as Beckett would say, Zizek says, Beckett's way better than Joyce. Beckett would say, fail once and fail again better. No. James Joyce invented what's going to be after the internet. So to involve all you keen thinkers right here, I'm going to count to 3, and you yell out in 1 to 3 words, what is going to be after the internet? 1, 2, 3. All that shit's already here, people. So. But again, I know I'm a failure. I'm not a miserable failure, but this is a mess. Okay, and if you know McLuhan history well, you know that Bucky and Marshall went to the Bahamas and started the first mess, media ecology. I call it Soul Salon or Super Session for you Mike Bloomfield fans. And there they are in the Bahamas with the Gaia spirit. Thank God we have women on our panels, not a bunch of white whiny males. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you being here. And my dear friend Mary Jane Schultz was there with them. Bucky spoke for 8 hours, they clapped, and he spoke for another 8 hours. If you don't know Mary Jane Schultz, she's in Michigan still. Corey, go visit her. She invented the word splitteracy. But here's the hidden psychic effects of things we invent. Just a year ago, she says, cell phones change our posture. It makes us all into question marks. Double duty interrobangs. Or, as I say, it turned us all into waiters. We're walking around like this. So you can literally flip a breakdown into a breakthrough. A rejection into a redirection. A weakness into a strength. Ask me later. I have handouts over there. Please pick one up and give me feedback. How Joyce flipped his 3 major weaknesses into strength: blindness, attempt to be a great singer, and he was an Ibsen wannabe. How many know about Ibsen's play 135 years ago that presage would happen into my hometown, Flint, Michigan? McLuhan converted to Catholicism as a performance art piece, and let's listen to Thornton Wilder right now, 1928. Art is confession, but art is the desire to tell the secret. But it's the desire to tell the secret and hide it at the same time. So that is, as Corey and I talked about earlier, Baba Ram Das, Be Here Now. We're all at the MEA convention right now. How cool is that? Right now, be here now. And the hidden ground of all these guys was Wyndham Lewis, as you know, and he said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. Sun Ra says it's not my story, it's his story. So with Tetrad management, we can reinvent McLuhanisms and McLuhan's one-liners. He made up, you know, and he just said, Robert Browning says, man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what is heaven for? He said, no, I'm going to reword that. I'm not just going to get insight from that aphorism, cute, nice. I'm going to reword it. Man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what is a metaphor? I took George Carlin's, whatever happened to letting kids stare out the window? And I said, well, whatever happened to letting kids stare at their cell phone? Because, you know, within a year or two, there won't be any more cell phones. They'll wiggle their big toe in their spectacle glasses. Will do something. You won't be walking around like this anymore. And kids will go, oh, I'm old school. I still have a cell phone. As Marshall did, he updated medium as the massage to user's content, which Eric and Dee told me I was wrong on that. He updated Global Village mid-career to Global Theater. He told me that one was right. And we know that what Marshall was doing was saying, I want new metaphors and new questions. Here's the human microphone. Communication of the new is a miracle.
It's a miracle,
But not impossible.
but not impossible.
So the priest is trying to sneak his booze over the Canadian border, and the custom officer says, excuse me, Father, what's in that flask? And he said, well, it's water. The custom officer takes a swig and he goes, that's whiskey. And the priest goes, it's a miracle. I got all these jokes from Marshall McLuhan, so don't blame me. Two goats are eating film coming out of a film can. One goat turns to the other, says the book was better. Two caterpillars see a butterfly fly by. One caterpillar says to the other one, you'll never get me up in one of them contraptions. And lastly, I really appreciate your time and energy. Please stay in touch with me. Come and read Finnegan's Wake, Marshall McLuhan with us, or start your own. It's pretty easy. Last human microphone. Let's blow the roof off this sucker this time. We are amusing ourselves to wake. Thanks so much.
All right, next up is Carolyn
Can you repeat that?
Next up is Carolyn Avronis from Colorado State University with Addressing the Dead Through Inter and Mass Communication.
Grateful Dead?
What?
Grateful Dead?
So Carolyn has lost her voice, and I'm going to be her proxy. So apologies to her for any errors that my mediation make in the process.
Yeah, I talked too much time yesterday. So my colleague and friend, Clayton Rosati, is reading it for me. I feel uncomfortable. I need to apologize for being a woman here and being called a lady.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Please,
don't know
please forgive me.
why I need to feel uncomfortable. being
I
here.
apologize.
Okay.
I'm sorry to use the wrong word.
Arrest that man.
And my talk is not funny. What I'll do, I'll have a presentation, and so I'll be on the presentations. It doesn't do. Okay. He showed me what to do. She doesn't know.
Does that?
It's the reason.
All right. Lenny Marshall.
Addressing the dead through inter-mass communication. My paper offers to examine the phenomenon of addressing the dead through words and through the integration of interpersonal and mass media, without the expectation of a real reply from the dead. While nowadays we tend to believe less in communication with the dead through the realm of our electronic media, less trying to reach our dead beloved ones through radio, television, telephone, etc. And there are some interesting historical works about this tradition by Frederick Hitler, Jeffrey Sconce, John Durham Peters. It seems that our current tendency in Western culture is more a therapeutic commemorative kind of writing to the dead, sometimes singing to them, sending them personal words within the public sphere. From poems to the dead, modern eulogies, graffiti in public places, to posts, to online notes on social media and digital cemeteries, the dead are constantly being addressed in the second person and present tense for many strangers to read or hear. This fascinating phenomenon that is based on a challenging communicative act towards a person that is practically not there has earned only little academic notice. Following Ralph Waldo Emerson, Peters reminds us that death is the ultimate distance of communication. In this paper, death is not only being treated metaphorically, but also practically. This paper deals with the communicative method of actually addressing the dead in this special media setting. My paper explores a set of 72 letters to the dead published in Israeli newspapers between 1997 and 2014. And it analyzes the practices that both perform a communicative act with the dead and embody their recipiency. I would like to open with an example of this letter of Yuval Abitay, who lost her father 5 years earlier in the Second Lebanon War. Dad, on this kind of day, I would rather not write you simple words, even though I speak to you quietly almost every day. In my heart, I'm certain that you hear me. Down in the paper is much harder. Don't worry, Tagal and Asaf, your beloved sons. I'm proud of them for you, and also of Mom. She is a hero no less than you. The tears are starting to float and to flood, and the letters on the keyboard become blurred. I'm thinking of you, Dad. We are growing up while you stay in your place. The time is passing, and we are changing without you. I love you. Yuval Amitai.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Some more examples. I know most of you can't read them because they're in Hebrew, but just to give you a sense of what these look like in the papers. The letters often include descriptions of the event that caused the deceased's death, the difficult moment when the writer received the bad news about the death, or the last time that the writer saw the deceased person. Each letter has a rich description of the feelings of absence and emptiness brought about by the death, and many times they include an update of what has happened since the person died. Each letter ends with warm words and sometimes addresses the new status or place of the dead person, for example, as a guardian from above or a spirit that floats in the sky. All the letters show not only a great openness and ease of talking with the dead, but also emphasize the realm of the letter as a place or something that enables communication with the dead. Well, there are many aspects to address here, as you might be thinking to yourself already. As practices of commemoration, the ways of ordinary people or the newspaper to criticize the cost of wars or other events, changing journalistic style, and new ways of constituting intimacy with the newspaper readership. However, I would like to focus in this talk on the very essential communicative act of these letters. And let's point to some of their characteristics. First, we have letters that address a dead person. Second, letters that are not sent by mail, but rather published in a newspaper. Third, letters that are read by eavesdropping strangers. Fourth, letters and newspapers as written technologies that echo and symbolize distance and death. These are especially important for written communication technologies. Whereas electronic media were historically perceived as narrowing the distance, written technologies emphasize the distance and acknowledge it. Following Ong, Kittler, McLuhan, the distance between the writer and the reader, between the moment of writing and the moment of reading, between the occurrence of thoughts and the actual practice of writing, and between the authentic self and the arbitrary signs on paper, all suffer from a time lag, spatial difference, problems in translation, and the unreachable other. Fifth, a format that includes a medium remediated by another medium. What kind of communicative act is emerging from this setting? What does it mean? And what type of communicative operation is it to address the dead as if he or she would read the text, publishing it in the newspaper and letting others read or invade the intimate situation with the beloved dead? In this constellation, what does the remediated letter as a place for connection actually create? These questions led my analysis. The paper analyzes the practices that both perform a communicative act with the dead and embody their recipiency. Considering the integration between interpersonal, the letter, and mass media, the newspaper, through their respective rhetorical practices and functions, the paper demonstrates 5 practices that enable and constitute this performative act of communication. 1, rhetorically positioning the dead as an addressee. What seems like a convenient practice of letter writing to you in the present tense, receives here a deeper meaning. The you is dead. He or she is not an active or an actual addressee in the moment of writing, nor in the potential moment of reading. Also, the past tense that is more relevant to the dead becomes the present in the letter. The letters address the deceased person as if he or she were actually present and reading the text. Dad, writes Yuval Amitai. Lior, my love, writes a mother. My dear husband Pascal, writes a widow. Kobe, my dear brother, writes Orben Shem. Who are Dad, Lior, and Pascal? Where are the dead as supposed readers of the texts? Are they constituted in these epistolary texts as actual addressees, seemingly being brought to the living dimension of the letter and taken out from their nothingness, the realm of absence? 2, emphasizing the tension between the living and the dead. The writers describe elusive feelings of existence and non-existence, presence and absence, moving in time and memories, and the longing for the dead who are in a faraway realm. The letters seek to circumvent this distance and seemingly create a special channel to the dead, yet at the same time, they emphasize that distance. The writers express the gap between them and the dead, and the newspapers represent this gap with the accompanying photographs and texts, which contrast the past that included the dead with the present where they are missing. 3. Drawing on the connectivity and movement of both media. Although Amite, and most likely the other writers as well, wrote their texts on a computer, sitting in front of a screen and typing on a keyboard, the concept of a letter brings to mind the old practice of writing letters by hand, relying on their materiality and movement. The paper itself, the ink, an envelope, stamp, and mailbox, a mail carrier, and the letter's physical, geographical journey as it travels to its destination. However, a letter written to a dead person and sent out by mail would probably get lost, return to the sender, or find itself in a dead letter office in the post office, as Peters beautifully writes about in 1999. Considering the potential paper routes, to use McLuhan's term, of such a letter, it would practically get to nowhere. A letter to the dead, as it is actually a dead letter, a letter with a dead end. However, being remediated in the newspaper grants the letter the newspaper's attributes, and the first one is connectivity, or to be more precise, its successful connectivity. That great elemental virtue of a mass medium like the newspaper that connects places, times, and people. John Tomlinson and others call this global spatial proximity. Karl Marx calls this the annihilation of space by time. David Harvey calls this time-space compression, and Anthony Giddens calls it the idea of the stretching of social relations across distance. Without the newspaper, the letter has no real destiny. It is the newspaper that provides endless destinations, endless recipients, and endless dissemination throughout space. The newspaper provides connectivity between unlimited spaces and people. It represents the promise of sending messages to everywhere and nowhere at the same time, to use Jeffrey Sconce's terms. 4. Using the newspaper's readership to support the broken communicative act. Peters defines dialogue with the dead as a broken communication. My paper argues differently from Peters that new life is coming from the broken act. However, for now, I will just state briefly that where the intended direct addressee is dead, there are the newspaper readership to support this broken act of communication. They function in a way as substitute readers in this process of communication. The newspaper's audience reads a text that seemingly does not belong to them. They enter into the epistolary ritual. They don't have a clear role or function. They're not the writer, and they're not the explicit addressee. However, because these letters are reminiscent of the traditional format of two people corresponding intimately, the newspaper readers can strongly identify with the actual correspondence. Sometimes, for a brief moment, they can even find themselves standing in the shoes of the writer or the deceased person. I did both. 5. Drawing on the legitimacy, importance, and validation that newspaper provides. To complete my explanation of these communicative practices, I would like to revisit the classic social function of mass media, status conferral, as it is described by the canonical essay of Paul Lazarsfield and Robert Merton. The status conferral, and specifically aspects of authority and legitimacy the newspaper provides are important here. Performing these letters in the newspaper, whose main content tends to include information and opinion pieces about the world, bestows prestige and enhances the authority of the communicative act, whether intentionally or not. The status of this illusionary act is legitimized by its inclusion in the newspaper. This does not mean that the newspaper's readers necessarily believe that the dead can be reached through the letters, but they accept the alleged communication. An esoteric practice would not make its way so prominently to the newspaper. But once it is in the newspaper, it is It is prominent and legitimate. The main argument of this paper is showing how the recipiency of the dead could be constituted only through the integration of interpersonal and mass media, and through the intriguing use of media to seemingly overcome the distance of death. The main claim that I would like to note here is that the communicative practice itself, in this particular setting, constitutes the being of the dead in the living communicative realm. The dead cannot exist prior to the act of communication, but are constituted by it. In other words, this constellation of communication is in fact what John L. Austin called a performative utterance, the creation of reality by representational systems by words. Austin defines performative utterances as sentences that do not describe reality and that could not be true or false, but rather create reality with words. By using performative utterances, people become married, people and objects are named, and assets are bequeathed. I suggest that we view these letters to the dead as a whole, as a meta performative utterance, or what I call an act of communicative resurrection. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Absolutely. Sounds good.
Well, it's my turn. This is the last turn. And hello. I think I'm the only Asian and only student. All these from these presenters. I'm kind of nervous. I'm a PhD candidate, and my professor couldn't come this time, so I'm gonna do this presentation instead of my professor. Hello. Okay. The current presentation. Can we start with PPT, please?
Yes.
Okay, the current presentation will discuss the main idea of the article titled Implosion and Explosion in Social McLuhan, how virtual and argument realities are related to embodied and disembodiment toward the reality. Second slide, please. During the presentation, I'm going to discuss McLuhan and the main idea of his theory. Further, the analysis of the article will take place with the focus on the two methodology, virtual and argument realities in social media. The explanation of explosion, implosion, and the application of Q methodology in this topic under the consideration will be provided with the reference to McLuhan's theory. Third slide, please. As many of you here already know that, Herbert Marshall McLuhan was a Canadian professor, philosopher, and critic whose study of the media theory received a heavy practical applications in the advertising the television industry. Having received the degrees in the University of Manitoba and the University of Cambridge, he started a teaching career as a professor of English. His name is related to many written masterpieces about the influence of the media on a human and the society. One of the most known work of this person is Medium's Massage, an inventory of effects. The author presented the idea that the medium was the message, and this theory was selected for the current study. Next slide. Okay, the article focuses on the analysis of the influence of media on the society. Having focused on McLuhan's idea that the medium is message, and the article tries to explore the point that medium affects the society as a whole. The experiment described in the article tried to show that a medium affects this society not only by the current it carries, but also by the characteristics of the medium itself. In the presentation, I'll try to explain in detail about what it means. Next slide, please. Q methodology, designed by William Stevenson, is used to study a person's self-image and to diagnose the behavior trends in a group. The method can be used to conditionally divide a group of people into more or less homogeneous subgroups or types in order to study opinions and beliefs. The technique is useful to determining groups of people who think in a similar or a different way. The technique refers to factor analysis in philosophy to consider ontology and epistemology of this issue. Next slide, please. The advantage of the DQ method is that a tested person manifests its individuality, but not conformity or discrepancy, stereotypes, and the results of the other people. The technique unites many people and their characteristics under several factors, which help see their common perceptions and behavior patterns. Next slide, please. The main idea of the Q method is to see the viewpoints of the participants on a particular issue. After it, the responses are ranked and sorted due to the series of statements which help define basic trends in human behavior in a rare group under the specific circumstances. Q method applies to both qualitative and quantitative studies with research design. Next slide, please. The main advantage of the Q method is that it reveals the perspectives of the study without making a researcher to articulate these perspectives themselves. It gives an opportunity for each respondent to express personal individuality and do not rather personal conformity or non-conformity with the stereotypes of other people. This method perfectly fits McLuhan's theory, which reflects how media affects the meaning of a human being and the society. Next slide, please. Virtual reality is a three-dimensional environment generated by a computer with which a user can interact into it, completely or partially. Unlike virtual reality, in which people intentionally fence themselves off from the environment, reality makes it possible to create a superimposition of the virtual world into reality in the field of user perception. In this way, one can simultaneously receive information from two sources, the real world and the computer-developed additional information. Next slide, please. Social media is a platform, an online service, and a website designed to build, reflect, and organize social relationships on the internet. In this article, social media is referred to as technology. Thus, one of the statements in this article is that the cultural experience of the relationship between a human body and social media is seen in two factors, primary reality and virtual reality. To understand how social media can be both inside and outside of a human body, it is important to consider the features of social media, which are, according to the article, participation, openness, conversation, community, and connectedness. As it was mentioned in the definition of social media, though, it believes social relationships. Social relationships are usually expressed via communication, sharing ideas, concerns, emotions, and opinions. Social media is a new means of communication provided through text, image, sound, and video within the existing paradigm of Web 2.0. Next slide, please. Social media carries a postmodern message.
Can you face the audience, please?
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just like facing here, just reading mine. As expressed in Marjorie Manuel's expression, the medium is message, is that in Ruan's communication value, authority, and presentation of old-fashioned daily life, submitting it within online sharing, social network services, and smartphones. Next slide, please. It's already 4, so I'm kind of hurrying right now. Okay. The main idea McLuhan tried to deliver is that the contemporary social networks have Lewin's traditional principles of communication in media. Published media are in crisis since all the news and recent updates appear much faster in Facebook, YouTube, and smartphones. Old media also steps into its existence. People do not need old types of and forms of communication with the contemporary social media platforms. New media has different aspects and mechanisms which have become more attractive to the population. Next slide, please. New social media is much more powerful than the old media. For example, on 15th of January in 2009, U.S. Airways 1549 dropped into a cold winter in the Pacific River. This accident became immediately famous worldwide due to the wise reaction of the captain, who saved all the passengers on the airplane. However, there was one more reason which made this accident important. Do you guys know? Yeah, nobody knows. Traditional media like newspaper and TV news were not the first ones which reported about the accident. Hundreds of people shared the information through the social media like Twitter, and thousands followed the accident directly from their homes. So now more and more people get to know about the recent news from the social media world, not media and traditional understanding of the world. Next slide, please. One more. Nowadays, social media not only informs people about the recent news, but it also affects human senses, making them more sensitive and expert. When speaking about the expansion of human senses, McLuhan's vision of the issue can help understand what is meant. According to McLuhan, the social media extends our ability to enhance functions of our human body and sense. The tools of argument reality help people expand their senses through new media devices, in such forms as glasses, watch, and shoes, sticking to human body. People have social media inside their bodies. They do not only control new forms of media, but they allow media to control them. This is what the article means about speaks about inclusion and exclusion of social media in the human body. Next slide. Next. Now, turning to the topic of exclusion and inclusion of social media, it is possible to consider the issue in detail. Exclusion express the outside influence of social media. People use social media for communication, interaction, and information sharing. The community has changed, and the human behavior changed as the part of the community, not as an individual. This is the meaning of explosion of social media in the society. As for inclusion, the situation in this case is referred to each person individually. Social media has changed each person from inside, the vision and the understanding of the surrounding, the mode of behavior and style of life. Each person who has faced social media has changed inside. McLuhan said the media creates huge change of social structure. It takes place when social media and reality collide. Next. The media is beyond medium of transporting the information, and it recognizes paradigm of human cognitive structure of human communication and base structure of society. In social McLuhan's age, the significance of social media substitutes object in the reality, which is enlargement of implosion. Implosion is fast erupting and demolishing barrier between referred and signifier, and eventually creates new community and object, which means signifier of the social media substitute real referred. Next slide. New media changes human behaviors and affects human brain and its activities. Next. Nowadays, the internet has occupied the control of human intellect and feelings. People lose a part of their identity. Social network changes the way people communicate, cooperate, and behave. The application of Q methodology in this case helps see the common feature in human behavior, which show that the largest group of people, the world, society involved in the social media have the same patterns of behavior. The same patterns of thinking, which means that they express not their real self, but the implosion of social media, which has occupied their identities. The use of virtual and argument realities, the social media makes the group of global community one personality without personal identity. The research conducted the experiment in this article. For this, the Q methodology was applied. The researcher selected the participants with the experiences in virtual and argument realities and in social media. Each of the subjects was offered 30 opinion statements about social media and virtual and augmented realities with the purpose of identifying how they changed people's perspective of life. The participants were grouped based on the statements they associate themselves with. Inclusion referred to the identity of community members, while explosion means the influence of new technology on the community itself, not on the individuals. The new media has provoked both explosion and inclusion of technology in human body. The authors of the article have correctly defined the issue as technologizing the body, when human brain thinks not like a person would do, but like the social media does. Okay, in conclusion, communication is an important grounding for the body-technology relationship. Even though technologies are integrated into human body within different perspectives. For example, embodying technology means extending the body into the environment through technology. This is a good feature of new technology. However, there is also the bad side of this issue when technology has penetrated into the mind of people, having created an implosion and having influenced of the mode of consciousness. Social media has significantly changed human brain and body, which has affected human relationships and the means of interaction. The explosion of technology into human activities have allowed people to expand their abilities. However, the implosion of technology into human brain and body has influenced the way of human thinking, which restricts identity of an individual. The article has connected McLuhan's media theory, explosion and implosion of technology, into a human being. The application of Q method and virtual and augmented reality to see the influence of social media on society. Thank you.
Great, looks like we're done. Thank you all very much for attending. Now it's time for a 50-minute Q&A session.
Andy, who's picking them? Who's picking the people?
I guess I will. You over there, sir. Is Lance Strait?
Yeah,
Oh, he had his hand up
I
first.
think my name's Lance Strait.
You what?
Identity, please.
I think my name is Lance Strait, just,
So be it.
that's what he... First of all, I wanted to say to our last two presenters that I really appreciated your presentations. It's great to get this kind of scholarship here at MEA and these new directions for moving the field forward. It's very important, and I would encourage both of you, speaking as the editor of our journal, to submit your work to our journal. I think it really would be very helpful. And by the way, I just mentioned Paul Grossweiler is very much an expert in Q methodology, so I think he'd be very interested to talk to you. But my question is for Carolyn, and I really found your talk quite fascinating, and for many years now I've been kind of appalled by Facebook, where we constantly see these, exactly what you're describing, which is these messages directed at people who are no longer alive, you know, like "Dear Dad, I miss you," and so forth, as posts on Facebook, which you know, I think I guess I sort of saw that as something connected to electronic media. So part of my question, you know, my underlying question is, when did this start up in newspapers? Because, you know, I still wonder about the connection, because if we go back all the way back to the introduction of the telegraph, that led to spiritualism in the United States, and the sense that you can contact the dead, not that that's a new idea, but that rather than by magic, in a sense, it was through electronic technology, which is, you know, its characteristics are disembodiment, dematerialization, so that I think even Edison supposedly was trying to work on some invention that uses electricity to speak to the other world. So I just really wonder, is it really a matter of orality and literacy, or is it a function of electronics underneath it that is leading to this practice that you're looking at?
Thank you. Should I answer?
Absolutely.
I hope you will.
Sometimes we get questions. Okay. Thank you very much. And so I saw this phenomenon in Israel for years, letters written to the dead in the newspaper. And it was fascinating. And I just started to go back, and of course I found actually electronic media and the idea of reaching the dead through electronic media. And a lot was already being done about this, and also ordinary people have done stuff about this. But at the same time, if you even go back to ancient Egypt, so the dead or the relatives of the dead would put letters around their head, asking them to help them with all kinds of problems that they have. And you can see in a way, so maybe in the Egyptian one is the only one that actually expect the dead to do something. But all the other ones, you see that the connection or the communication with the dead has no expectancy for reply. If you look at letters and written technologies. So I think we can split it and divide it into two things. One are the written technologies, non-electronic media, and the other one are the electronic media, which seem as ones to or perceive distance as can be shortened, and that the dead could really be reached. While here we see something else. The dead cannot really be reached. And Facebook probably is supposed to be my next paper with this. There are also some new thing of people that ask before they die to have messages sent to their beloved ones after their death on their birthdays and stuff like this. So through internet. So it's all here. But I think there is something interesting in that in non-electronic media that the distance cannot be overcome. Thank you.
The gentleman in the red shirt, please.
Yeah, for Professor Ronas. It seems to me that this might be a process, a normal process of mourning extended into various media. I'd be interested in knowing the proportion of men to women that do this.
Yeah. So specifically in Israel, the letters in the newspaper are written as part of tragedies. So when the newspaper cover a tragedy as a terrorist attack, as a war, as a wildfire in Coronel Mountain, and people that tried. So sometimes when it's war, more soldiers would be there. But you can, so sometimes the addressees, or many times the addressees are men, but the writers could be men and women. But I can find some examples that don't.
Are there any hard numbers on that you derived?
I didn't check it, but I can.
I'd be interested in knowing because vociferous utterings of the mourning process in the Middle East is particularly intense with the keening and wailing rituals and so on. I was wondering if it was an extension of that.
Yeah, and of course it's a mourning process. It's a mourning process.
The gentleman in the blue shirt, please.
I know, same topic, and I really don't know anything about this process, but just to put it in a different perspective, in the literary tradition, there's apostrophe, where you would address an inanimate object or a person as if she were there.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 19th century in particular, as Lance was talking about, mesmerism and all these things were made up of, I think, by electricity even before the telegraph. And I think there was a real attempt to contact the dead.
Yeah.
But, and at this time in 19th century America and England, death was a big phenomenon. It was the glorification of the dead. They had all kinds of poetry and rituals and shrines, and the Queen wore black for 1,000 years. Maybe not that long. Whereas these letters, I don't think are addressed to the dead. When you say, "Dear Father," your Agatha and I don't know the names, Tom and Jerry, your sons. Well, he knows the sons of the, who the sons are, and really we're addressing a readership that's out there. And my sense of connection with the electronic world is through television, through these reality shows where you put people in a moment of crisis, and then they blubber, they cry, and then we sit back and we cry with them. But despite the kitsch, there's kind of a healing process for people that are going on. I see more of that taking place, but again, I don't know.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, first of all, for literature, you're right, probably I do go there too. The readership, so I have another paper dealing with intimacy in mass media and thinking about the readership point of view on these letters and how they become intimate with both, with the writer and with the reader. And I agree, the writing of the letter is duplicate, or it's like double writing. It's, yeah, because of course the dad knows all kinds of things that the writer feels she needs to write for the readership to know, and the opposite. And then about electronic media, I think there is a real feeling that the dead can be reached, or at least there is something there that can show richness. While here, it's I think it's kind of entwinement of memory and mourning and commemoration, but still through communication.
You're probably aware of cemeteries and mausoleums that have recorded messages from the dead, so when you visit the gravesite, they will actually talk to you.
No.
Gary Gumpert's book, Talking Tombstones, gets into that.
What's it again?
Gary Gumpert's wrote a book called Talking Tombstones and Other Tales of the Media Age, and that's like one thing that he brings up.
Okay, thank you.
So just curious, do we have any questions for Station Kim about her presentation in particular? Personally, I found that I definitely have a question for that. What was the exact thing that inspired the whole idea behind your project? Because as a person who's very much into social media and its effects, I find that quite fascinating as well. Was there a particular incident that inspired you, or was it just a long-term interest?
First, okay, thank you for asking the question. But personally, actually my professor designed the entire paper design, and he was having, I'm not sure what he has come up with. I just, after he designed his research topic and his process, he actually contacted me individually, and we actually started together. And I'm not sure at where he probably have that kind of ideas. But if you give me your email address, I'm going to write down the answer to you via email.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any questions for Mr. Jerry Fialka?
So my question is, again, are we supposed to read this entire thing? Because I've been trying and it's fascinating. And are there actually Finnegan's Wake reading clubs out there?
There's supposedly about 52 Finnegan's Wake reading clubs across the world. We're the only ones that combine Marshall with. And you can see movies about it. It's an intriguing thing, and the important thing is that when you read the Wake, you look at the words as they're being mispronunciated by everybody in the reading. I got a good education, but I know how to mispronounce really good, so it worked good for me. I'm a idiot. So, yeah, you know, it's so easy as this. You go on the internet, you print out a page of the Wake. You don't have to go to Amazon and buy it for a penny. You buy the Wake for a penny. You print out one page of the Wake, and you have a party. And then you just have everybody go around the room and read one line from the Wake. Then you don't ask them necessarily, what do you think that means? You ask them, how did those words make you feel? All the other 51 reading clubs across the world say, let's be antiquarian, let's figure out what Joyce was trying to say. There's no content in the Wake. Sorry.
So, in this vein, Jerry, I love how you challenged decorum and put like style right to the fore. But after all, I was just left with this nice feeling of having taken a really good breath. The effect was wonderful. So I don't have a question so much. So thank you.
Well, I thank you, Andrew, because this is it. I talk to people often and I say, let's do something consciously that we don't do. So we don't consciously study the hidden psychic effects of the things we invent. Most of the people in here do this because that's their profession. But normal people don't go around and try to figure out how a pen changed them. Or how clothing, anybody show up in here without clothes on, they would have called security. Humans don't need clothing. Sorry, you've been brainwashed, you need it. But we got along and said, oh, this is cool, we should have clothing. But my friend said, oh, I get it, because I just read an article that our immune systems were all fucked up because we have clothing. So I'm not saying clothing is good or bad, like she had in the slide, good or bad. Marshall said services and disservices, because you can flip a disservice into a service.
All right, any further questions? Any last questions?
Was McLuhan essentially an optimist or a pessimist?
When he was asked that, he said, I'm an apocalypse. We're in trouble. But he's basically a positive guy and a loving man. And he knew that the word apocalypse means to reveal. So he was just saying, I'm Toto and the Wizard of Oz. I'm pulling the bird back. And he said, you decide. You figure out what's electricity, how it's changing.
Right, and that's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you all very much for attending.